If I were to place this clay pot in your hands right now, you would probably look at it for 2 seconds and then put it back like any ordinary old vessel. Because from the outside, there is nothing special about it, no gold, no silver, no precious stones, just a simple clay pot. But every mystery does not reveal itself from the outside. Some mysteries keep their answers hidden inside, and this pot did exactly that. When it was opened, it contained things that posed a question to history, a question whose answer has still not been fully determined. Was this just a pot? Or part of a technology centuries ahead of its time? In the year 1936, archaeologists were excavating ancient settlements around Baghdad in Iraq. Such excavations often yield broken pots, coins, and everyday objects. That day began in the exact same way. Soil was being removed, dust was flying, and old items were coming out one after another. Then, amidst the soil, a small pot appeared. Its height was barely the span of a hand. There were no carvings, no royal insignia. At first glance, it looked just like the other excavated vessels. If it had been left there that day, it probably would have remained just another anonymous object in the crowd of history. However, when researchers examined the pot closely, strange facts began to emerge one by one. Inside the pot was a copper cylinder, a thin iron rod inside that cylinder, and both were separated by an asphalt-like substance, so they were not directly touching each other. This was the first time someone asked a completely different question. Why was there a need to place metals so thoughtfully inside a simple pot? Was this just a storage container, or did it have a purpose that we are misunderstanding today? From this point on, the pot ceased to be an old artifact and became an investigation. In the next chapter, we will meet the person who looked at this pot not from the perspective of an ordinary observer, but through the eyes of an engineer. After that, a simple pot became one of the most controversial objects in history. A mystery remains just a story until someone starts taking it seriously. The same thing happened with this pot. Placed on a museum shelf, this simple vessel remained silent for years like other ancient objects. Then one day, someone noticed the arrangement of the metals hidden inside. They looked at the pot not as a vessel, but as a design. Copper in the middle, iron inside it, and a deliberate distance left between the two. This could have been a coincidence, but if it wasn't, what was its purpose? Wilhelm Koenig, a German archaeologist working at the Baghdad Museum at the time, took this question further. He made no sensational announcement. He simply put forward a possibility. If an acidic liquid like vinegar or grape juice were poured into this pot, the copper and iron could undergo a chemical reaction. Today we know that this exact same principle works in a simple battery. In other words, it was possible that this pot could generate electricity. Remember, this was a theory, not a final truth, but many great discoveries in history begin with a single question. Now the debate was no longer confined to the museum. Scientists thought that if this idea was correct, there was only one way to prove it: build it and see. Years later, researchers made a clay pot of the exact same size and shape, with the same copper cylinder, the same iron rod, and then poured vinegar into it. For a few moments, silence fell over the room. All eyes were on the measuring instrument. A few seconds later, a small reading appeared on the screen. The voltage was very low, but not zero. This meant that such a structure could indeed generate electricity. This is where the discovery became even more mysterious, because one question had been answered: could it generate electricity? Probably yes. But now an even bigger question lay ahead. If this truly was a battery, what was it used for? In a temple? In a royal palace? In a craftsman's workshop? Or were we imposing the result of a modern experiment onto a 2000-year-old intent? An experiment can prove what something can do, but it cannot prove what it was actually built for. And this is where the most difficult chapter of this investigation begins, because now it was time for evidence. An experiment had succeeded. A clay pot, copper, iron, and an acidic liquid could together generate a small amount of electricity. That much was now proven. But science does not stop there. Science asks the next question: was this the exact reason why this pot was made? This is where the entire case changed. Archaeologists stated that the shape of an object does not tell you its purpose, the evidence found around it tells you its purpose. And this is where the Baghdad Battery began to falter. At the site where this pot was found, no definitive evidence was discovered to show that there was any system using electricity there, neither a workshop whose purpose was explicitly electrical, nor any written account mentioning such an experiment. In other words, the pot existed, but its story was still incomplete. Then a new possibility emerged. Some researchers suggested that this pot might have been made not as a battery, but to safely store sacred objects or important documents. Others believed it could have been part of a religious ritual or a medicinal process. None of these ideas were considered the ultimate truth, because every possibility had some arguments and some weaknesses as well. Then the debate deepened further. Some scientists argued that even if we can generate electricity from an ancient object today, it does not necessarily mean it was created for that purpose. For example, if someone finds a steel spoon 1,000 years from now and performs a scientific experiment with it, does that prove the spoon was a scientific instrument? Probably not. The same argument was applied to the Baghdad Battery. Meaning what is possible does not always prove what the original purpose was. Now, two truths existed simultaneously in this case. First, this structure can generate electricity. Second, we do not have enough evidence to say with certainty that this was its true purpose. And right there, the Baghdad Battery became more of a debate than a mere object. There was only one step left in this investigation. If the evidence is incomplete, how is a verdict reached? Does history get written only by proofs, or do unanswered questions sometimes become a part of history as well? In the final chapter, we will open the file of this entire case one last time and see which direction the truth points to the most. There comes a moment in every investigation when new evidence stops coming in, and we have to try to understand the whole story using only what we have. The Baghdad Battery stands at that exact crossroads today. We know that this object was actually found. We know that its structure was different from ordinary vessels, and we also know that in modern experiments, such a structure can generate a tiny amount of electricity. But knowing this much is not history. History is made when a claim is backed by enough evidence. That belief takes the place of questions, and the Baghdad Battery has still not reached that destination. It is possible that this was truly an ancient battery. It is possible that its purpose was related to religion, medicine, or some craft process. And it is also possible that we are trying to understand an object today whose world was completely different from ours. This is why a small pot raises such big questions. Often we think that history is just a collection of answers, but the truth is entirely different. History is also the name of those questions that have not yet found answers. And perhaps this is why the Baghdad Battery, sitting on a museum shelf today, is not just an old artifact, but a living symbol of human curiosity. Perhaps in the future, a new excavation, a new document, or a new discovery will solve this entire mystery once and for all. Or perhaps this spot will forever remind us that the past was far more complex than our imagination. Because sometimes, the most precious discovery is not an answer, but a question that forces humanity to keep searching. And perhaps the Baghdad Battery is precisely that kind of question.